It's no secret that knowing more words means that you're better equipped to understand and speak a new language. But what if I could prove to you that certain combinations of words called ngrams are a more potent study tool? For example, the 3-word German phrase auf jeden Fall shows up more in conversation than 99% of individual words in the language. I explored 2.5 million spoken words across all the Easy German podcast episodes to see how valuable of a tool these ngrams can be in building your intuition in another language, particularly for speaking. So, what are ngrams? Let's show and then explain. We'll split the following sentence into different ngrams. You are late and forgot die Sauerkraut. Skipping over the intuitive step of looking at just individual words called unigrams, we'll come to bigrams, which are any 2-word combination. We can then also look at trigrams, which is any 3-word combination. Put very simply, an ngram is any group of n words in a specific order. If we look across the words in a book or a podcast transcript, we can see very interesting and useful patterns in how individual words and groups of words show up. The simplest case of ngrams is just looking at single word frequency, and is why many people rightfully start learning a language by looking at the most frequent individual words. But looking at the most common 2, 3, and 4-word combinations adds so much more depth and can tell you where to focus, since language is more about knowing how words are stitched together rather than just individual words. That being said, ngrams don't need to have meaning on their own. They just need to be a unique combo of words, like then you or and I. Those 2.5 million spoken words I mentioned earlier from the Easy German podcast come from the transcripts of more than 400 30-minute episodes. Let's go through a few examples, zoom out on broader patterns in the data, and then be very specific about how you can use these. Here are 3 examples of how ngrams identify things you should know. First, the 2-word phrase, for example, zum Beispiel, is in the top 100 ngrams and is more common than almost 60,000 unique individual words that show up in the podcast. It's more common than the words more and right, and this phrase shows up in 99.4% of conversations. Another example, I have, I believe, I am, and I know are 4 of the most common spoken phrases when speaking and show up in every single conversation. And one final example, the 4-word phrase, I don't know if, shows up in half of all these episodes. The power behind these ngram examples are that individual vocab words aren't always the most common or valuable things to learn. Taking a look at German, 11 of the top 100 ngrams aren't individual words, and more than half of the top 1,000 are similar grouped words. Since the average person has 1.5 to 2 hours of conversation every day, as you speak more in your target language and immerse in shows and podcasts, you'll want to intuitively understand these ngrams and have them at your fingertips when speaking. So now the question is how to make this practical, and I have 3 suggestions. I wouldn't recommend trying to learn these ngrams directly, but it can be very helpful to use these common word groupings as a way of priming before you immerse. Take a look at a list of common phrases or structures in your target language, and then make note when you notice them as you're watching TV or reading a book. The exposure plus reinforcement, etc. is exactly how language learning works. Ngrams give you a nudge toward what's valuable by creating an initial understanding of what's common and then reinforcing that. They also push you towards understanding more than just individual words. And tip number 2, if you want a better way to learn vocab, use a tool that can tell you how a word shows up in these ngrams. For example, if I'm learning the German word abwarten, to wait or bide your time, it'd be helpful to see common ways that it comes up in many contexts, rather than just a sample sentence. Many dictionaries may offer curated example sentences, but knowing the specific ways a word commonly comes up backs up your studying with data. And tip number 3, depending on your temperament, one last option is to incorporate common ngrams into your study routine and just drill them like a regular vocab or sentence card. Good question is where to get these ngrams. I've included the top 10,000 German ngrams in a Google Doc under this video if you're learning German. For other languages, there are tools where you can copy and paste in some text to get a list of the common ngrams, but the problem is that you want tens of thousands of words to get generalized results. Without a coding background and a lot of text data in your target language, the best way to get the top ngrams is to use a phrase book or grammar book. Now unbunch those panties, because I don't mean work your way through it like a textbook unless that's your thing. Instead, peruse the books for a few minutes to create some exposure to a few things that they're trying to introduce you to, as common phrases and formal lessons pre-select for what you're likely to see out in the wild. Then, see how you can spot these examples while reading, watching, and listening in your target language. I've gotten feedback on the videos that I make like this one that they have useful enough tips that people stop watching YouTube to actually go engage with their target language. That is my goal for this channel, but it's also terrible for the YouTube algorithm. So please consider subscribing and sharing this video. And then when you're done with this video, watch another video in your target language here, and only then close YouTube. I hope this video has been a helpful introduction to how a powerful quantitative text analysis technique like ngrams can be used meaningfully for language learning. And I'll see you in the next one.